Progress.
Okay, we're up to Ayin Vav Amid Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. The last thing the Gemara was talking about is that if an animal has a broken leg, a broken limb, and the bone is protruding, so the halacha is that if the bone is covered by roiv of the flesh, if it's covered by roiv flesh, then it's considered a kosher animal and the limb is considered connected. But if the bone is not covered roiv with flesh, then it's considered disconnected and it's evim and achai. So the Gemara says hanu gidin. So it has to be covered with basar, with flesh. So this situation was there was a certain animal, gidin rachin dasal kamid Rabbi. There was an animal that had a broken leg, let's say, but it wasn't covered by flesh. It was covered by soft sinews. Now the question is, these soft sinews will eventually harden. So the question is that considered basar or is it not considered basar? In other words, the soft sinews, which are right now soft but will harden, do they have the din of basar or not? So Amar Rabbi says, what's the problem? And by the way, this is actually talking about a situation where not only is it a shaila on the limb, it's talking about it, Rashi explains, it's talking about a situation where it was the leg broke in such a way where if it's taka considered disconnected, then it's a treifa. So it's a big shaila on the animal. So he came in front of Rava and he says, what's the problem? Meaning not only was Rava Mekel, he says, what's the concern? Chada, first of all, it should be kosher for the following reasons. First, Rav Yechanan Shita is that sinews that are soft now, even though they're going to get hard, they have a din of basar. How do I know this? So basar has different ramifications. It has ramifications for our discussion. It also has ramifications for Karban Pesach. We know that to be a part of the Karban Pesach, you have to have a kazayis allocated. So the situation is where they only left, everything of the Karban Pesach was already covered. All they had left was a kazayis of these soft sinews that are going to harden. And some guy got that was his luck. That was the. So Rabbi Yechon says it works because the soft sinews, even though they're going to harden, has din basar. So you see that Rabbi Yechon says it has a din basar. If it has a din basar, that means that it's the broken leg is covered majority by basar, so it's not considered a treifa. Va'oid, and a second reason to be mekel is a teiruchas on the Manisha Yisrael. Hakadosh Baruch Hu has rachmanis on the moment of Yisrael. Meaning, in other words, so we're not going to look for chumras. We want to avoid treifus. We want to say that it's kosher because if you say it's treif, then you're going to have to throw out the animal. Now, obviously, that's not a reason b'fnei atzmai, but if you have Rabbi Yechanan, why should I be machmer? So that's why Rava said it's pasha that it's mutter, and he even said like my nichashla. So I'm the Rav Papa Rava. Rav Papa said to Rava, Rishim ben Lakish. First of all, you said that Rabbi Yechanan holds this way, that soft sinews can be counted as part of the Karban Pesach. They have a din of basar. Rish Lakish disagrees. So first of all, it's not so pasha. The Isur Deraisa. Anything with an Isur Deraisa. Treif is Isur Deraisa. And you're just saying, what's the concern? The concern is it's a machlokes and it's an Isur Deraisa. Savit Deraisa l'chumra. Ishtik Rabba was quiet. So the Gemara wonders, why was he quiet? What was the major taina against Rabba? Is that Rish Lakish is chaylik on Rav Yechanan, and we should be machmer for Rish Lakish. But didn't Rava himself say that we only pass him like Rish Lakish 3 times throughout Shas, and this is not one of those cases? So why was he so floored that Rish Lakish is chaylik? Who cares? He doesn't pass him like Rish Lakish. He only passes like Rish Lakish 3 times throughout Shas. This is not one of the 3. So the Gemara says Shani hacha dehada be Rav Yechon like Abdi Rish Lakish. The answer is, the truth was, Rava realized that Rav Yechanan was chayzer. Not only is it a machlokes of Yechanan and Rish Lakish, Rav Yechanan actually retracted his view to follow Rish Lakish that soft sinews that will harden do not have a din of basar, and that's why Taka stopped Rava. How do I know that Rav Yechanan was chayzer? The Amalek, because Rav Yechanan says later on in this Masechta, Al takniteni b'loshen yachad anishan osa. Basically, there was a situation over there where you had the head of a young calf that was soft now, but it was going to harden. It had to do with the Shaila Treifus. And Rav Yechanan said, it's just a Das Yachid, meaning the fact that it's considered Basar is a Das Yachid. So we'll see later on the context. But the point is, Rav Yechanan was Chayzer, and he felt that it does not have a din of Basar, in which case it would cause it to be a treif in our discussion. Similarly, the Gemara says, Ha'u nishbara etzem, the Yatzel L'chutz. There was a case where the bone was fractured and it broke through the skin. Now, the halacha is that if it's covered majority by flesh and skin, it's kosher. That we said before, yesterday. But the case was ishtakel kurtimine. That not only was the bone fragment sticking out, a bone chipped off, a small part of the bone that was it sort of decayed and fell off. So the question is, does that make it worse? We know that if the bone extends outside of the flesh and it's covered roiv basar, it's still kosher, it's still part of the animal. The question is, this part of the bone had a decay and part of it chipped off because it decayed. The question is, does that make it worse? So also Abaya, he asked Abaya. So it's lasa rigli. Abaya did not answer for 3 regalim because he wanted to wait for each regel. He was hoping to speak to other rabbanim who would get together on shalosh regalim. So he was to try to deliberate more on this. Amir Rabbi Mamasa said to the owner of the animal, stop wasting your time. Don't wait for Abaya. Zil kami de Rava, b'rei de Rav Yosef bar Chama. Go to Rava. The Harifa Sakini is very sharp, meaning he won't need to wait shalosh regalim. Speak to Rava. So also the comment, he goes to Rava. Amar michti nishbar etzem yotz l'chutztanan mali nafal mali isa. So Rabbi says the halach is clear in the Mishnah that if part of the bone broke through but it's covered roiv basar, it's kosher. What's the difference if part of the bone decays or not? What's an nafkamina? Amar the Ravina l'Rava. The Gemara has multiple questions about this concept again, that if the bone breaks through, it has to be covered roiv basar. Or even roiv skin, we had yesterday is a shaila of roiv skin, mix 50-50, but if it's covered roiv basar, we said that is kosher. So the Gemara is going to have multiple kashas. It's going to take us to the Mishnah. I'm the Ravina Rabbi, mislaki mahu. What if it's not covered in roiv in one area, meaning it's not like that the bone broke and in one area it's covered roiv. It's a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, but if you put it all together, it's roiv. I don't know the Metzias. It's covered 20% here, 20% here, 20% here. But if you put it all together, it's right. Or misreisis mahu. What if the basar, the flesh that's covering, is flattened, meaning it's pushed down, so it's flattened, so it's not as thick as it was. Or mismases, or if the basar is decaying. The Gemara just speaks out. Hechidam mismases. What does it mean decay? How decay does it have to be for it to be the shaila? Amar Rabbi Yeshua kol sharei v'koydre, that the flesh is so decayed that the vet would cut it off, because it's not healthy basar. So those are all shailas, and the Gemara does not respond. The Gemara says, another kasha nikiv ma. What if the flesh has a hole above the bone? Meaning the bone is exposed and the flesh is covering up your eye, but there's a hole in it. Does the hole in the flesh make a difference? Does it make it that it's not covered up your eye because there's a hole? Or niklif ma. What if it's peeled away from the bone? So, it's meaning it's like sort of resting on top, but it's not connected. It's peeled off, but it's like resting on top. Or nistak mahu. What if it was split? It's there, but it's split in half. Or nistal shilsha tachten mahu. Or what if the bottom layer of the flesh is removed? So there's a top layer of flesh, but the bottom layer of flesh is removed. So Tashma asks, the Gemara says, that answer, I think I have an answer for the last one. Part of the flesh is removed. It's covered, but the flesh is thinner because the part of it is removed. Amr Ulam Rav Yechanan or Hareu Kabasar. Didn't we say yesterday Rav Yechanan held that skin alone is enough? So the shaila is if part of the flesh is removed. Well, if skin alone without flesh is good, then definitely less flesh is also fine. I mean, you get a shaila of, let's say, a third of the flesh thickness is removed. Well, the halacha is you don't even need flesh at all. If you just have skin, it's fine. So then kavachomer, you don't need to have a lot of flesh. So the Gemara says, no, dilma dekana meshchayide. Perhaps the case is that the skin is enough, is where it's a part of the bone that doesn't have a lot of flesh. Right? Let's say there's a part of the bone where there's very, very thin flesh, and that's where the skin is enough. But in an area that there should be a lot of flesh, and some of the flesh is removed, maybe it's not good. Amar Rav Ashi, Kavina bei Rav Papi iboiluhu. When I was by Rav Papi, they asked me the kasha. Nikter kiminta bas ma'u. What if the flesh is carved away like a ring around the fracture? So there's a fracture, and it's covered piroiv, but there's a ring of it that's removed. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that's. They have a picture in Art Scroll. So they say that a ring of flesh has been carved away around the covering, so the covering consists of a patch that is completely separated from the rest of the animal's flesh. You have to know the Metzias exactly, but it's a really bad break, and the flesh is covered piroiv, but there's a part of it that's mamish exposed. That's what it seems to be. So, upashtanam hadam Rav Yudam Rav, and we answer from even the Rav. Dav is a sha'alti l'chacham b'roivim, v'amru misartu be'etzem u'mayla arucha. They said that they had a situation like this. In Ochel Parz Lamizr Zarif, that basically what you'll do is you'll scratch some of the flesh away and it'll actually heal. In other words, even if it's like this, the bone can heal. So because the bone can heal, it's not going to be a treifa. Amrav Papa v'hu dekana garmi didei. It only applies when the bone is connected to the flesh, meaning it has to be still connected somewhat, then it could still heal in such a situation. Okay, new topic, Zak the Mishnah. The Mishnah is going to be dealing with a shilya. Now the shilya is the amniotic sac. It's like a placenta, but it's basically the sac that the fetus is in. So there's a couple halachas. Halacha number one, Hashayich is a behema, and what's a shilya? You shecht an animal, and you find inside the sac, an empty sac. The halacha is nefesh hayacha teichlanu. It's kosher, meaning it's considered kosher. The shechita covers all parts of the animal. You're allowed to eat it. It's a little gross, but if it's nefesh hayafa, if you're not squeamish, you could eat it. The eina matama, but the fact that you could eat it does not make it food. It's not really edible. So the halacha is that for things that are not edible, it's not roy lekabel tuma. So therefore, although it's kosher, you could eat it conceptually, but it's not mekabel tuma, and it's not leitumas eichlin, leitumas nevela. It's not mekabel tuma as a food. It doesn't transmit tuma as part of the nevela. It's not considered basar, and it's not considered food. But but if instead of just eating it, you said, I'm going to eat it, you intended to eat the shilya, the placenta, then the halacha is, then mitama tumas eichlin, avaloi tumas nevelas. The halacha is it transmits tuma as a food, but it's not nevela, meaning it's considered a food, but not nevela. It's not considered nevela, but it is considered food. Because at the end of the day, it's not really considered basar, but if you think about it, then it's considered food. It's like an apple. Doesn't start off as an apple. If you decide to eat it, then it has a din of eichel. Now the Gemara and the Mishnah takes on a second topic, and that is shilya sheyatza miktasa. While the animal's alive, some of the shilya leaves the body. Now the concern is, there's always a concern that inside the shilya was a fetus. That's always the concern. Now it could be there was a fetus, and so you say, well, where's the baby? So first of all, there might be a baby inside, and maybe the baby was in the shilya at the time, maybe not. But even if there's no baby, it could be that it sort of disintegrated or liquefied at the time, later on, but it could be at the time there was a fetus. Now the halacha is that because the shilya part of the shilya left the womb while the animal's alive, the concern is, what if there was a head of the baby inside at the time, and then it sort of just fell apart and that's part of the shilya? And if the head came out, we know then that's considered a birth, in which case it's not included in the shechita. So the shilya sheyatza miktasa asur b'achila, you can't eat it because there's a concern that there was the head of the baby at the time, and therefore it's considered born, and therefore it's not considered included in the shechita. Similar vlad isha, similar vlad behema, because the head leaving is birth for a person and for an animal. Now another halacha, hamavakeres shepia shilya. If let's say an animal gives birth to a shilya comes out, no fetus, a shilya comes out, and it's a bachar. So the halacha is the first thing that comes out of an animal is a bachar is kaddish. It has a din of a carbon. So this shilya should be kodesh. The halacha is yashlichenul klavim. It does not have kedusha. You could throw it to the dogs. The Gemara is going to explain why is it you could throw it to the dogs. The Gemara says you go with statistics. First of all, 50% of all children that are born are female. Now females do not have a din bachar, so it's 50-50 whether it's kaddish b'chlal, because it might have been a female. And even if it wasn't a female, maybe it was something that didn't have the form of an animal. So meaning maybe it wasn't a viable child, and even if it was a viable child, maybe it was a female. Right? So it's called nidma. Nidma means that if it gives birth to something that doesn't really look like its species, then it doesn't have kedushas bachar. So first of all, it might have been a nidma, and even if it wasn't a nidma, it might have been a girl. You put that together, api roiv, it was not a bachar. There's no kedusha to that shilya. But mikdashin, but when it comes to karbanos, a carbon that gives birth to a shilya tikaver, it has kedusha. Why? Because then both female and male are kaddish. It's dafka bachar that does not apply to females. But the baby of a shlomim is kaddish, whether it's male or female. So then then you have roiv is male or female. By a bachar, you can put together the fact that you have 50% girls which are not kaddish, and then even if it was a boy, maybe it didn't look like a cow, so then it's roiv is not kaddish. But by karbanis, where the kedusha applies to male and female, then you don't have that roiv, and therefore you have to treat it with kedusha. But now the Mishnah ends off, ein kayvenoisa parshas drachim. You're not allowed to bury this baby of a karbanos on the road, in the fork of the road. You're not allowed to hang it on the tree. Why? Because this is chukas hagoyim. Chukas hagoyim means, as we'll see later on in the Gemara, anytime goyim do something for no real reason, more superstitious, or kishuf, or avodah zara, we don't do it. So apparently the goyim would take their holy animals and they would bury it by the fork of the road, or they would hang it on a tree. And therefore, because there's no reason to do such a thing, you're not allowed to do it either. The halacha is a chukas hagoyim. We paskin like the Marik in Shulchan Aruch, and that is that anytime there's basically three things that goyim do that are prohibited. Listen, goyim wear clothes. You can't wear clothes. Of course, you can wear clothes. Chukas hagoyim. Chukas hagoyim has three categories. Number one is something related to avodah zarah. Number two, something to do with promiscuity, pritzus. And number three is something that they do that we have no reason why they do it. If there's no reason why we do it, then we have to be choishish that has to do with avodah zarah. And therefore, they would hang the carbon, their holy animals, on a tree or in a fork of the road, and therefore that's chukas hagoyim because there's really no time for such a thing. Okay, so finish up. Zak the Gemara. Minani mili. How do I know this halacha that if a shilya is born from an animal, you shecht an animal, you find the shilya said you could eat it. It doesn't have a din meichel, but you could eat it. Tan Rabbanan kol behema toichlu l'rabbeis es ashilya. Kol behema means every part of the animal you could eat, even a shilya, meaning it's not non-kosher. Now yachal afilu yatzasa miktsasa. Now you might think, what if the shilya, part of the shilya, is born before the animal shechted? Meaning we said that you're not allowed to eat it in such a situation because we're choishish that it's the head. Tamaloi mar oisa v'lo yasa. That's the oisa. Now the question is. So we have a special pasuk. If part of the shilya was born before the animal was shechted, you're not allowed to eat the shilya. The question: what do you need a pasuk for? It's a svara. It's not the shilya. It's that if the head is born before the shechita, then the baby is considered removed from the shechita. And if the shilya comes out, there might be a head inside. So what do you need a pasuk for? It's more of a svara than a pasuk. If I were to ask you why is it if part of the shilya comes out while the animal is still alive, you shech the animal, you can't eat the shilya? Why? It's not a special gzeirus hakasiv. It's because if the head comes out, it's a problem, and maybe the shilya is part of the shilya is the head. So the Gemara says michti ain't shilya b'leiv lad lamli crow and you have pasuk for it. The answer is cross machbalma. You're right. It's not a gzeirus hakasiv. It's not a gzeirus hakasiv. It's a derabanan. It's a svara, and the pasuk is more just juxtaposed. Now, despite the fact that you're able to eat the shilya, it's not considered oichel for tumas oichlin or tumas nevela. Says Rabbi Rav Yitzchak bar Nafcha or chamar shesholku ma'u. What if you have the skin of a donkey? The skin of a donkey is not edible, so it's not considered not kosher. It's not edible. It's not food, and therefore it's not royal kabel tuma as tumas oichlin. It's not subject to tuma as if it's a food. Now the question is, what if you cook the hide of a donkey? So now it's technically edible. Is it now royal kabel tuma? So that's the shaila. So the Gemara says lamai. Are you asking? Well, there could be two reasons why it could be tameh. One is as food, or two, you say as a nevela. If the animal dies, the animal is a nevela. The donkey that dies is a nevela. Now the hide is not because it's not edible, but maybe if you cook it, then it becomes tumas nevela. So you're asking if there's tuma. Are you asking mitzad tumas nevela or tumas oichlin? Either way, there are mishnayos that already address it. So I'm not sure what the question is, because this concept of hide that's inedible, that cooking and making it edible, there are mishnayos that address it. There are mishnayos that basically say it is metama tumas oichlin, it's royal kabel tumas food, and it's not metama tumas nevela. So this shaila is already addressed in Tanaic literature. Lamai ilu tumas oichlin tanina. Go to the next page. Ilu tumas nevela tanina. Now, what are the mishnayos? Tumas oichlin. Regarding tumas oichlin to Tanya, it's mefurish the brisa. The brisa says ha'or v'ashilya, the hide and the shilya, which is the placenta, ein metama tumas oichlin, they're not food to mekabel tuma. Or shesholku v'ashilya shechishav le'metama tumas oichlin. But if you have a placenta you decided to eat, so you made it food, or if you take hide and you cook it and now it's edible, then it is metama tumas oichlin. So it's a mefurish mishnah, a mefurish brisa that it is metama tumas oichlin. Now, if it's tumas nevelas, it's also tanina, because the pasuk says benivlasa, the nevela, the carcass of a dead animal is tameh. V'loy ba'ar, not the hide. V'lei b'atzamis, and not the bones. V'lei b'kidin, not the sinews. V'lei b'kanayim, not the horns. V'lei b'tlafim, not the hooves, because they're not food. They're not part of the animal. V'amir Rabbi Chana, loy nitzachal she'asan tzike kedera. And Rabbi Chana says, even if you cook them, they're not metama tumas oichlin. So you see that it's not metama tumas oichlin. So it is metama tumas. I'm sorry, not metama tumas nevela. So it is metama tumas oichlin and not metama tumas nevela. So what was the shaila? So the Gemara says loy tumas oichlin. The shaila was whether it's metama tumas oichlin. I thought if you cook hide, it is. So why would you have to ask the shaila of Yitzchak bar Nafcha? Why is he asking? The answer is shani or chamor demois. That his question is donkey hide different? Because donkey hide is really gross, so you might think that even after cooking it, no one's going to eat it. Kamash will know. If it's technically edible, then it's a royal kabel tumas oichlin. Now, so the halacha was that if the shilya left the womb of the animal while the animal is still alive, you can't eat the shilya. Now, why? because we're concerned that there was a baby there. Now, I don't see the baby. There must have been a baby at the time, and it's sort of liquefied. And when it came out, the head of the baby came out as well. Amar Rav Elazar, lo yishanu el she'enim avlad. This halacha is where there's no other baby in the stomach. Meaning, the case is where you open up the womb, and all there is a shilya. There's no vlad there. So where'd the vlad go? It must have been, there was a vlad at the time. And when the shilya left, the vlad was there at the time, and therefore inside the shilya is the remnants of a vlad. Avl yeshim a vlad, but let's say you open up the womb, and you find the shilya that's sticking out, and there's a baby. So then the halacha is, in choshel vlad acher. Says Rav Eliezer, you could be mekel. Meaning, what are the options here? The shilya left, it's sticking out. I open up the womb, there's a baby. There's two options. Either that baby went in that sack, and it left the sack, and the sack left the womb without the baby. In which case, the sack is mutter because there's no baby in the sack. The baby is mutter. Meaning, I'd be lenient. Or there's another possibility. Really, the mommy had twins, and one of the babies is over there, and the sack had a different baby that died, and that is now in part of the sack, and it left, and it maybe had the head in there. You should be machmer. Says Rav Elazar, if there is a baby in the womb, we're not going to be choshesh there's another baby. You could be mekel. So Rav Elazar is being mekel. Rav Yechon Amar, Rav Yechon says, Bein in imavlad, bein yeshim avlad, choshesh vlad acher. Rav Yechon says, no. In this situation, you can't eat the sack if it came out while the animal's still alive. Why? There's a baby in the womb. Then it says maybe there was a second baby. That's that baby, but then maybe there was a second baby and it was in the sack at the time when it left, and therefore the sack is a din of remnants of a child, and therefore it's a problem. So Rav Elazar is being megal, and Rav Yechon is being strict. Eini is true. Rav Yirmiyah l'chom Rav Elazar. I thought Rav Yirmiyah say that Rav Elazar was being machmer. So the Gemara says you're right. Aliyat mar hachiyat mar. This is a different version. Rav Elazar lo yishanu ela she'ena kshura b'vlad, aval kshura b'vlad ein choshel vlad acher. Rav Elazar said like this: Lo yishanu el she'en kshur l'vlad. This halacha that if the shilya is partially exposed when the animal's alive, that it's a problem because we're concerned that there was a baby there. Rav Elazar says that's true, even if there's a baby in the stomach. Meaning, even if there's a baby on the side, it's a problem because we're choshesh for another baby. When are we megal? The only time Rabbi Elazar says that I'm going to be megal, if there's another baby on the side and there's a sack sticking out, I'm going to be strict. Why? Because I'm going to be choshesh that there's a second one. The only time I'm going to be megal, said Rabbi Elazar, is if the sack and the baby are connected. If the sack and the baby are connected, then and the baby is on one side and the sack is sticking out, then I'll be megal. Because then it's more likely that the baby and the sack are really one and there was no other child. But if they're not connected, I'm going to be machmer. Rav Yochanan says, Rav Yochanan says, no, it doesn't have to be connected. If there's a baby in there and the sack sticking out, we assume the baby and the sack are together. We're not choshesh for another child, and we're going to be mekel. So in this case, Rav Elazar is more strict. The Rav Elazar is only lenient if the shilya is connected to the vlad, but if it's not connected, then he's choshesh for another child, and therefore he's going to be machmer. And the Gemara says, and this is how the version ended up that Rav Elazar is being strict. Tanik Rav Elazar, we have a brayso that backs this up. Hamapeles min behema chayav oif. If a human woman, gives birth to a fetus, but it looks like an animal, the halacha is it's machlekes tanaim. We're going to go with the view now. The halacha is that when a woman gives birth, she goes through days of tumah, days of tahara. It's not for now. It's also different whether it's a male or a female. So the halacha is, it's machlekes tanoim. This brayso follows the view that if a woman gives birth to an animal, to a baby that does not look like a person, it looks like an animal, the halacha is it's not considered a vlad in halacha, and there's no tumah tahara. Says the brayso, let's say a woman gives birth to such a fetus, the shilya in mahem, and there's also a shilya. So the question is, there's two options. Option number one is the shilya and this deformed child go together, and therefore she's not tumah tahara. There's no tumah tahara. Or no, maybe there was a second child. There's the deformed thing, which is not considered a vlad in halacha. Or maybe there was another fetus, a healthy looking fetus, that was in the shilya, that died and liquefied, whatever it is. And therefore there should be Tumah Tahara. Says the halacha, B'shel Yimayin, Bizman Kshura Behen, Ein Chosh Lo V'Acher, Ein Kshuren, Harini Matal Ein Chomer, Bein Shleif Ladish, Ani Oimer, Shem Nimur Shaper Shel Shilya, Shem Nimucha Shilya Shel Shaper. So says the Brisa, if the Shilya and this deformed baby are connected, they're bound together, then they're obviously connected, and therefore there's no Tumah Tahara. But if they're not connected, then I assume that the deformed baby had its own amniotic sac that disintegrated. The amniotic sac had its own healthy baby, the baby died. And therefore there should be Tumah Tahara, and you have to be machmer as if it was a boy and a girl. So you see in this brisa that we're only connected if the shilya and the fetus are taka connected together. Okay, then the Mishnah said that if the animal gives birth to a shilya without a baby, then if it's a bachar, you could just throw it to the dogs. There's no kedusha. My time, why is no kedusha? Amr, Ika breder of Ami, Roy behemis yaldis davar hakadish bebachara. Umiya behemis davar shein hakadish bachar. Because first of all, statistically, there is a minority that it might have given birth to an animal that's not considered a child at all, like a minute nidma, an animal that doesn't have the same likeness. A cow gives birth to an animal that looks like a goat and it doesn't have kedusha. So there's a small percentage of that. The chol hayelad is yadis chad mechta zachar mechta nekeva. And even if it looks like the same species, it's 50% boy, 50% girls, and girls are not Kaddish Bechar. So you have the 50% girls, plus you have that even if it was a boy, it might not have looked like the species. You put it together, and it's 51%. That's Raiv, and therefore Raiv tells you that it's not going to be Kaddish. Samach miyuta, the nim machzad the nekevis, have a zachar miyuta, the mukdashim cover. But if it was a carbon, you would have to bury it. Why? My timer, because Ruba Bar Mikdashu. Because by a carbon, you don't have this special roiv. Why? Because the roiv is predicated on the fact that 50% are girls and girls are not a bachar. But girls are kaddish by if they come from a shlamim. If they come from a carbon, they are kaddish. And therefore, you don't have roiv to be megal. Then the Mishnah, just to finish up, the Mishnah said, but you can't bury the carbon's shilya on the fork of the road or on a tree because of that was chukas hagoyim, darkei amari. Abaye and Rabbi said the following rule: Call anything that actually works. It might seem crazy, it might seem like an outlandish goyish azach or like a superstitious azach, but it works from a medical perspective. Then it's not a problem of following in the ways of the goyim because it's actually effective. But but something that doesn't have medical practice and they just do it anyway because of superstition, whatever it is, you're not allowed to do it. So that's the Gemara. So you're not allowed to do it if you're only allowed to do it if it has a medical reason to do this. Vatanya, but isn't there brisa? Elon shemasha paroisav. If you have a tree that its fruit are falling off too early, it's a diseased tree that the fruit are falling off too early. So what do you do? Saikroi beskira. You take red paint and paint the tree. And you put rocks on it. So now, and that's allowed, and it's not considered following the ways of God. Now, you're putting rocks on it, on the roots, and you're painting it red. Now, rocks on it, the Gemara says, I understand why you put rocks on it. Because apparently, maybe the fruits are falling off because it has too much vitality. You got to weaken the tree. Meaning, that from a horticultural perspective, putting rocks on it is effective. But why am I painting the tree? What's the point of painting the tree? That's a superstitious, weird zach. There must be a goyish zach. So why are you allowed to do it? The Gemara says, you do that so that people see the tree and have rachmanis on you and notice that there's a problem and they'll daven. I mean, the purpose of putting the paint on it is not superstitious at all. It's to have people see the tree and say, oh, there must be such a problem. Let's daven and let's have rachmanis on the person. The Gemara says, Kedetanya, as the Brisa says, V'tamei tamei yikrav. A Mitzayra is called tamei tamei. Everyone would say tamei tamei. Why do you have to call him tamei? Tzarech l'idea b'ram, you have to inform publicly that he's a Mitzayra. V'ram v'vakshal rachim, so people daven for him. Similarly, if someone has an unfortunate situation, he becomes ill, whatever it is, you have to tell people, and people daven for you. They used to be when people would get cancer, they wouldn't like to tell people they had it until it was a real problem, and then you start telling people, you got to have people daven for you. Ravina says, what is the source that they would take clusters of dates and hang it on a palm tree that doesn't have proper fruit? Let's say you have a palm tree which fruit are coming off too early. So they would take dates from the store and wrap it around the tree. Why would they do this? It's like this Tana, so that people notice this and say, oh, we got to daven for him. And people would daven. Hajj and Allah, behema hamakasha. I will stop here, pick it up tomorrow. B'ez Hashem.